Hello and welcome back to the Manga Education Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Chen. I'm a writer-producer for the manga webtoon space. This is a successful series we try to take to anime. And today I'm going to be answering the questions that you guys submit on our social media. And yeah, let's get right into the video. But before that, drop a like for the YouTube algorithm. Really helps us get seen and get this out to more people. And if you're interested in learning more about the manga webtoon anime, production space, please subscribe and turn on the bell notification. Awesome. The first questions are going to be through Patreon. Patreons get educational benefits such as like scripts, behind the scenes, tips, and they're also allowed to ask questions that are automatically put into the videos, the Q&A videos. So we're going to start off with Victor, who submitted a question. As a writer, after one builds a portfolio for some time, how do they make deals with artists that are not solely commission-based? So more of a partnership is kind of what you're talking about. There are certain benefits to doing a partnership. I think that when you partner with someone, there's an enormous amount of trust between two different parties, because if one party, for example, if the artist or the writer does not deliver, then the other person has to pick up the slack or the entire ship sinks, right? It's kind of like being the founder of a company. When two people are founding a company, if one person drops the ball, then they have a huge percentage of this company, but the other person maybe has to cover for them, and that's not ideal either. So it takes an enormous amount of trust. These artists that I work with on a partnerships level, I've known for multiple years, so that's why it has been something that is more of a relationship build. It's not just like I pick someone, I'm like, hey, do you want to go 50-50 on this? That's not how I really do things anymore. I think on the flip side, commission-based has benefits, has downsides. The benefits obviously are, if the artist can't deliver, then you can just like replace them and cut them off. That's usually how a lot of these larger IP, tend to approach things, such as like, Sonic the Hedgehog, right? A writer for Sonic the Hedgehog, a comic, has zero ownership of that Sonic the Hedgehog IP. And so if that writer can't deliver, boom, axed, on to the next, right? Just hire another writer to replace that. On the flip side, when you have someone like, let's say Hunter x Hunter, if Togashi, for example, who has obviously a big stake of Hunter x Hunter, if he can't deliver, they can't replace Togashi, unfortunately, to have someone else do that kind of work. So if Togashi goes down, Hunter x Hunter goes down, and that ship sinks, which is pretty interesting because I think there's certain benefits to having commission-based and there's certain benefits to having a partnership with people, and making those deals just takes an enormous level of trust. You can going into that level of partnership without knowing who you're doing the partnership with. Because again, think of it as like when you're writing a story, let's say you're writing the next Naruto and you want to bring in an artist to do Naruto with you. Before you ask that person to be your 50-50 partner, you have to think about like, would they run away if things get hard? Would they be able to deliver on time? Same with you, like, because you could also drop the ball too. Let's say they're up and they're delivering and you're not, then how are things going to work out? So you also have to know yourself, know the other person, and what's fair. Hopefully that answers your question. Higan Bana is asking a good question. Higan Bana is a celebrity here at the Patreon, asking questions every single time. Considering a creator's intellectual property, what percentage of an IP's rights would you recommend is appropriate for a publisher to hold compared to a creator? Now, what percent does it begin to feel like an unfair deal? I can't give you certain percentages. I would say the standard is that the more money they give you, the more that they're going to want your IP. So let's say they fund your entire production. In that case, the project is not even possible without the investor. And so without the investor, your project is just an idea, and an idea isn't worth much, if I'm being honest. Everyone has ideas. When they fund a lot of the project, that's where they'll ask for more. If they don't fund the project and they just have distribution, they'll still ask for a percentage of your income for that project. Let's say you're distributing on Netflix and you're not exclusive, and Netflix doesn't have any rights to your project. They'll still take a percentage of everything that you make on Netflix, obviously, because you're distributing on Netflix. But with regards to IP, like, there's ways that Netflix doesn't own, every single IP that is just being distributed through Netflix. Like, they can't do that. The more integral a publisher is to the development of your project, the more of a latch onto your IP that they'll have. And I can't give you certain percentage numbers because it differs between everyone. At what percent does it begin to feel like an unfair deal? I would say the unfair deal, and I've heard about this with someone, is that if you funded the project and then they took all your rights, that makes no sense to me, because if you fund the project, you're just looking for a distributor. And if they take your IP or your rights or anything like that, but you funded everything, all they did was press publish, which has benefits as well, but I don't think they should be taking the rights to your project if they are just distributor as a publisher. If you're going to lose like distribution rights to like other countries, or the ability to sell a film version of your story, then like someone better be paying you money or covering some of the budget for the production of your manga or your webtoon or your comic or whatever, right? Anyway, that's just my take. All right, next I'm going to questions that you guys submitted submitted on Instagram. Any tips for making it as a writer with no prior experience? Write something, whether it's a book, whether it's a web novel, comic, whatever it is. If you're a writer and you have nothing to show, no one's going to take a chance on you, really. I think that you really have to take initiative as a writer, put out projects by yourself. Because really, the interesting thing about writing is that there's actually zero cost to developing something like a book or a web novel or even a script other than your time. And if you can't show someone that you're willing to, like, let's say a producer, and you're like trying to get like a screenplay made, or like a comic made, or like a novel made, if you're not even willing to be like, all right, here's a draft of something that I've worked on, then how is someone ever supposed to be able to look at you and be like, I know that you can deliver this thing, let me give you this amount of money to make this project happen? Like, you can't expect anyone to invest in you unless you have a portfolio. And if you have no portfolio, then you have to build your portfolio by writing something, whatever it is. So my advice would definitely be like writing something. Again, you don't want to write something just to have something. You want to write something to learn how to write, because, you know, everyone thinks that they're a good writer until they hit the market and they find out they're not. So I think that it is a skill that you have to develop, and you develop by doing. What was the hardest job you have ever done? My hardest job? I think the job I do right now is super fun, but it is super hard. You know, I write multiple series, I produce multiple series, I sell multiple series. I also market by doing videos like this. I also post on social media. I also educate, also mentor. Like, let's say I'm doing a new webtoon series and I spend 1 year pitching, 2 years developing and creating, and then it hits the market. And that's like 3 years of my life just gone developing the series. There's a lot of pressure on myself, and I'm sure the team that worked on it, to make it a hit. And it's never a guarantee that it's going to be a hit. We think it's going to be a hit, but there's never a guarantee. Even if something is well received, a lot of indie films, let's say, are well received, but they don't hit the same numbers as like Mufasa or Sonic. And we all want those Sonic and Mufasa numbers at the box office. It's hard because I think like you want to be both well acclaimed and also just mainstream. That enormous pressure on just me across multiple people. There's people whose livelihoods depend on me and my ability to create a good story, and obviously the pressure of readers, all that kind of stuff. I think that is a lot of stress and pressure. And so maybe it's not the hardest job in terms of like, hey, I have to sit down every day at a coffee shop to write something. I think it's the hardest job in terms of like the mental stress of it, if that makes sense. Again, I try not to think about it too much until someone asks me a question like this and sends me into a spiral after the videos, after they turn this camera off. But, you know, I think it's something that definitely I think about is the stress of the team and all that stuff. So this is probably the hardest job I've ever had in my life, but it's the most fun. How do you make money as a manga author? So manga in Japan, obviously you have a publisher, you publish in a magazine, people buy the magazine, you get a percentage of volume sales, percentage of, you know, people are reading your stuff digitally, purchasing your things digitally, you get a percentage of merchandising, all that kind of stuff, the anime, all that stuff. So that's how you make money as a manga author. In the US or internationally, outside of like France and Japan, I would say it's a little bit more complex. There's not a lot of international mangaka compared to like the webtoon space, but, you know, it's quite similar where you have book sales, you have digital sales, and if there's transmedia deals like film, all that kind of stuff, then you can make money from that. The only difference is that there's not as much of a market of publishers outside of France and Japan. So that distribution is currently the gap that I see in the market. Again, there's certain publishers starting to make those moves, but there has not been a lot of successful series outside of France and Japan, again, that have hit like global phenomenon. Manga is a difficult space for the international mangaka. I think like there's a lot of clout in that space, more clout than there is in the webtoon space. But for the creator that is outside of Japan and France, there's not as much money as people would think, because you're competing against the GOATs. You're actively competing against Naruto and Dragon Ball, which is like insane. So I think it can be a challenge. But again, that's one of my goals, is to be producing a serialized manga this year. So, and I'll keep you guys updated on that progress. Could you publish your manga or anime without revealing yourself publicly and still get profit? Of course. I mean, I think most mangaka in Japan are actually anonymous, and that's because fans are a little bit crazy. They send you death threats, all that kind of stuff. I don't think it would be that way necessarily internationally, but a lot of people like to do like a pen name or something. So I definitely think you could do a pen name or like a miscellaneous or like a mysterious facade of some sort to keep your public image out of the spotlight there. What common mistakes do artists make when they try their hand at writing? I think a lot of artists, and again, this is not an issue with being an artist necessarily, I think this is an issue with being an amateur writer, is that things are overly complicated. If I can't distill my story into 1 to 2 sentences at the start, then it's too complicated. Titanic, Forrest Gump can all be distilled to 1 to 2 sentences that are the core direction of the entire story. I think if you can just keep your story and your characters really simple at the start, and then again, it evolves into something much more. I think if you think about Attack on Titan as like a very complicated story, that could still be distilled down to like, in a world where Titans like eat humans, like this guy wants to kill all Titans or whatever, right? That's like basically the log line, and obviously the story is more complicated than that, but it doesn't start off that complicated. It starts off very simple. Monsters are trying to kill this guy, he's trying to kill the monsters because they killed his mom. That's it. And then it becomes more complicated as the story progresses, and I think that's the best way to go about it versus like starting off very complicated and overwhelming a reader and scaring them off. So I think really focus on the characters, really focus on a simple story, and then just making sure that it's entertaining. And then once you get the readers in there, you can make things a little bit more complicated. How fast do your artists draw, and how do they improve how fast they finish panels even colored? Yeah, I started outsourcing coloring because it became too hard for people to color and do line art and do storyboards all in 1 week. And so yeah, I think we try and do like, I don't know, I would say like if you can do 2 storyboards, which is like 100 panels in 1 week, that'd be great. And then you try and ink it the following week, and maybe you outsource backgrounds if it's an intensive art style. You definitely outsource colors, because I think that color can be done completely separately from storyboards and inks. I think again, the Western comic book industry does this, the webtoon industry does this. You want to have as many people doing the different parts of each production as possible if you have really tight deadlines. Because I think, you know, the background, for example, someone who does character art doesn't necessarily have to be drawing the backgrounds. Backgrounds might be a waste of someone's time, because if someone only has like, I don't know, 10 hours a day to work, you want them to be doing like one thing really well, rather than like, all right, let me work on the characters in the background. No, break that into 2 pieces. Someone's doing the characters, someone's doing the backgrounds. You know, I think that over time, you know, people start off really slow usually in the serialization business, but I think the pressure of having to work faster, and obviously the pressure of readers, kind of like I was talking about before, makes you work a little bit faster. Serialization is something that I'm still trying to master myself as a producer, and trying to encourage artists to be able to work that fast. At the same time, it's also like a very tough industry. I think people burn out a lot, and you see this again in the Japanese manga industry, in the webtoon industry. A lot of people get sick really easily, really early, or die early. So it's kind of like, you know, overwork is really a big problem in this industry. So how do you know, for me, it's like, how do I give the artists, you know, hiatuses when they need the hiatus? How do I give them the resources they need to be able to take some things off their plate, like a letterist or a colorist or a background artist, you know, assistants to make their lives easier is something that I'm always thinking about. But that's a long way of saying like, the more you do it, the faster you get, but also there's a limit to how fast you can get as well. I'm gonna end the video there. Hopefully this was educational. We got kind of deep into it today. I feel like there were very technical and deeper questions in today's video. And yeah, again, thank you guys so much for watching. Today's word of the day is gonna be ring, which means that if you have watched this far, please comment ring. That is the word of the day, so I know you watched that far. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any more questions, leave them in the comments. Peace. I'll catch you guys on next week's video.